Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ba'd. As mentioned, we have reached the 32nd hadith, and that is a tremendous hadith. This is a hadith an Abi Sa'id bin Malik bin Sinan al-Khudari رضي الله تعالى عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, that the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, لا ضرر ولا ضرار, there is no harm nor any reciprocation of harm. There is no harm and there is no harming. In this hadith, hadithun hasan, رواه ابن ماجه ودار قطني وغيرهما مسندا. It has been collected by Ibn Majah with Dar Qutni with a chain that is sound and it has no disruptions in it. ورواه مالك في الموطأ مرسلا عن عمرو بن يحيى عن أبيه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأسقط أبا سعيد وله طرق يقوي بعضها بعضا. This hadith has also been collected by Malik in al-Muwatta, but its chain is mursal on the authority of Amr bin Yahya, on the authority of his father, on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But in this chain, the name of Abu Sa'id is missing. Abu Sa'id is missing from this chain, and there is the disconnection and the disruption in this particular chain of narrations or narration. However, there are other routes that strengthen one another. So thus this hadith is hasan. This hadith, it is good. This hadith, it is good. Naam. The Muhaddith al-Madinah, the Muhaddith, the Muhaddith, the scholar of hadith of al-Madinah, al-Shaykh al-Allama, al-Shaykh Abdul Muhsin al-Abad al-Badr, حفظه ta'ala. Shaykh Abdul Muhsin, he mentions, he says, هذا الحديث مشتمل على قاعدة من قواعد الشرعية. He said this hadith, it contains a principle from the principles of the Islamic legislation. It contains a principle from the principles of the Islamic legislation. This hadith is a hadith that is tremendous, as we will come to see, bi'ithnillahi ta'ala. And although it is short in its wording, its meaning is vast and far-reaching. Its meaning is vast and far-reaching into many aspects of our lives. Into many aspects of our lives, both religiously and as relates to our worldly affairs. It will have an impact on our daily life. وَهِيَ, and this principle from the principles of the legislation, رَفْعُ الضَّرَرِ وَالضِّرَارِ, it is the removing of harm and of harming. It's the removal of harm and of harming. And bi'ithnillahi ta'ala, we will get into more depth and detail as relates to the meaning and what is intended by the meaning of each of these words. وَهُوَ خَبَرٌ بِمَعْنَى النَّهِي عَنِ الضَّرَرِ وَالضِّرَارِ, and it is a hadith that comes, and its form, it is of that of making a statement. It is giving information, but the meaning of it is a prohibition on harming and of harm, or on harm and of harming, or harm and the reciprocation of harm. والضرر قد يحصل من الإنسان بالقصد أو بغير قصد. And harm, it can result from an individual, whether that be by their intention or not, whether they intended to harm or they did not intend to harm. Now, and this is important to understand. So whether they intended to harm someone or they did not intend to harm someone, both enter into this. If the end result of the action is harm, then it is not allowed. والضرار يكون مع القصد. And ضرار, harming, then this is with intention. So I want you to gather, because as we are going to come to see, the ulama, they have different opinions and statements as relates to what is the meaning of darar and what is the meaning of dirar. What is the meaning of darar and what is the meaning of dirar? Shaykh Abdul Muhsin, he mentions that as it relates to this, the meaning of darar, then this is a harm that is done whether intentionally or intentionally. This is harm that is done either by intent, intentionally or unintentionally. Harm. Now, whereas dirar, then this is a harm that is done that a person intends to harm. Now, so this is from the statements of the ulama as relates to what are exactly the meaning of each word that are mentioned in this hadith. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, La darar, there is no darar and there is no dirar. So what is darar? Shaykh Abdul Muhsin, he said, then this means a harm that could be intentional or unintentional. Whereas dirar, then this is a harm that is intentional. So this is one statement from the statements of the ulama as it relates to what is the meaning of each of these particular words. وقال الحافظ ابن الرجب, and Al-Hafiz ibn Rajab, he mentions في جامع العلوم والحكم واختلفوا هل بين اللفظتين أعني الضرر والضرار فرق أم لا. He said the ulama, they differ. Is there a difference between both words, meaning الضرر and dirar? Is there a difference between them or not? Naam, is there a difference between them or not? فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَالَ, you have from the ulama those who say هُمَا بِمَعْنًا وَاحِدٍ, they say they mean the same. وَعَلَى وَجْهِ التَّأْكِيد, and they have only been repeated so as to show an emphasis. They've only been repeated to show emphasis. Naam, but the meaning is the same. وَالْمَشْهُورِ, and what is well known and famous amongst the ulama, أَنَّ بَيْنَهُمَا فَرُقٌ, أَنَّ بَيْنَهُمَا فَرُقًا, is that between the both of them, then there is a difference. There's a difference between each. ثُمَّ قِيلَ, and then from them, the statements how they between there's a difference. They first point out that in the darar hul ism, is that the first word darar, then this is a noun, harm. والضرار فعل, and dirar, then this is a verb, al-fi'l, and that's why they translate it as harming. You have harm, then you have harming. Now that harm is being done. فالمعنى, so the meaning, أن الضرر نفسه منتف في الشرع, is that harming it within itself, then it is prohibited inside of the legislation. That harm within itself, then it is prohibited inside of the legislation. وإدخال الضرر بغير الحق كذلك, and also harming in an invalid manner or harming without right or harming unjustly, then also likewise this is prohibited. Now, so to cause harm that is inappropriate, that is not in its due proportion, and inshallah ta'ala we'll come to speak more about this, then likewise this is not permissible. Now, that makes sense? Then likewise, this too is not permissible. وقيل, and it's been said, الضرر أن يدخل على غيره ضررا بما ينتفع هو به, is that darar, then this means that an individual, he harms other than him by doing an action that is beneficial to him. So he harms somebody else, but by doing something that he himself benefits from. So an example of this could be, for example, if there were multiple communities that were living upon a river, right? And those who were upstream decided, if we dam off the water, this will bring some benefit to us. It will bring some benefit to our village and some advantage to our village. However, when they do that, although it benefits them, it will harm those who are downstream, right? So the harm that they're causing is due and related to an action that they themselves benefit from. Now, so this is prohibited inside of the deen. So such actions are prohibited inside of the deen, and the proof is this hadith. Now, and this is why I said it enters into various aspects of our lives, right? It enters into many aspects of our lives, into our day-to-day life. Muslims, we have to have a concern, and we have to be very vigilant, we have to be wise, we have to be intelligent as relates to our actions. We have to look at our actions and the potential outcome of our actions, so as to ensure or to strive our best to ensure that our actions are, one, within themselves, not harmful, and two, that they do not result in harm. They do not result in harming someone else. Naam. And this is what some of the ulama, they say this is what's meant by darar, that an individual does an action that is harmful to others, but it benefits them themselves. وَالضِّرَارُ أَن يُدْخِلَ عَلَى غَيْرِهِ ضَرَرًا بِمَا لَا مَنْفَعَ لَهُ بِهِ. And dirar, the meaning of dirar is to do actions that will cause harm to others without any potential upside for the person themselves. So they do things and it causes harm to others, but there is no upside, there is no potential benefit in it for them themselves. It's just harmful all across the board. So bila shak, this is too harmful. Now, كمان منع ما لا يضره ويتضره به, الممنوع. For example, the one who he prevents something that doesn't harm him, but it causes harm to others and it results into harm to others, and this is prohibited. Now, ورجح هذا القول طائفة. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله. And there were a number of scholars who they said that this opinion of the difference of the meaning of the two words, then this is more correct. منهم ابن عبد البر وابن الصلاح. From them was Ibn Abdul Barr and Ibn al-Salah. وقيل, and it also has been said, الضرر أن يضر بمن لا يضره. So I want you to keep in mind all of the various aspects of how the ulama break down what are the meaning of these two words, because you will find that the definition of each of these will not necessarily negate the other. The existence of one does not negate the other ones. So they all can be taken together. They all can be taken together. So another aspect, another angle, another shade of the meaning is that an individual, he harms someone who didn't do anything to him. Right? He harmed someone that didn't do anything to him. And this is the meaning of darar. Don't hurt anyone who didn't do anything to you. And the meaning of ad-dirar, they say ad-dirar أن يضر بمن قد أضره به على وجه غير جائز. This means that you harm someone who bona fidely has harmed you, but you harm him in retaliation in a manner that is not permitted. So your retaliation to harm that's done to you is in a manner that is not permitted. Okay? So someone harms you, and then as a result, you escalate the manner in which you choose to retaliate against that particular individual. This is not permissible. Okay? This is not permissible. Imam Ibn Rajab goes on and he says, وَبِكُلِّ حَالٍ, and in any event, فالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما نفى الضرر والضرار بغير الحق. In any event, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he prohibited harming and the reciprocation of harm, or he prohibited harm and harming, or harm and the harm by proxy that is done without right. That is done without right, unlawfully, unjustly. وَأَمَّا إِدْخَالُ الضَّرَرِ عَلَى أَحَدٍ بِحَقٍّ. But to cause harm to another individual in a manner that is justified. Causing harm to another individual in a manner that is justified. إِمَّا لِكَوْنِهِ تَعَدَّى حُدُودَ اللَّهِ. Because this individual has violated the prohibitions of Allah. So for example, the murderer, the one who murders intentionally, then from the prescribed punishment for this individual is what? Is execution. So is executing an individual, is that causing harm to an individual? Undoubtedly. Now, the individual is being put to death. So this is causing harm to an individual. But is this harm that is done to him, is it done in right? Is it done justly? Yes. It's done justly. Now, فَيُعَاقَبُ بِقَدْرِ جَرِيمَتِهِ. So he is punished in accordance to his crime. So he is punished in accordance to his crime. أَوْ كَوْنِهِ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ أَوْ غَيْرَهُ. Or an individual, they may do something that results in harm to themselves and results to harming others, right? فَيُطْلَبُ الْمَظْلُومُ مُقَابَلَتَهُ بِالْعَدْلِ. So the one who is harmed, the one who suffers injury, they seek restitution from that individual in a manner that is just. Right? So those who harm is caused to them justly because they have committed a crime, so therefore they are punished, or they cause injury and are the cause of injury to others, so that those who are injured, they seek damages that are, and they seek restitution that is equitable. Then the Shaykh, he mentions, he says, فَهَذَا غَيْرُ مُرَادٍ قَطَعًا. He said, then this is not what is intended by this hadith, period. This does not enter into this hadith, that there is no harm, no reciprocation of harm. So in other words, a person can't commit murder, and then the judge sentences him to death, and he says, no, you can't kill me. Because the Prophet said, there is no harm, no harming or reciprocation of harm. He can't use this hadith now. He said, no, this hadith was not talking about you and the likes and situations like this. It's not talking about this. So if an individual, a legal punishment is prescribed to them, or they are harmed because they have caused harm and suffering to someone else, it does not enter into the prohibition of harm in this particular hadith. إِنَّمَا مُرَادُ إِلْحَاقُ الضَّرَرِ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ. But what is intended is harming other individuals without right. Is harming others unjustly and without right. Now, فَهَذَا عَلَى نَوْعَيْن. Imam al-Rajbi said this is upon two categories, two types. أحدهما, the first of them, ألا يكون في ذلك غرض سوى الضرر بذلك الغير فهذا لا ريب في قبحه وتحريمه. نعم. And this is that an individual, the sole intent, نعم, the sole intent of harm that is being caused to others, there is no upside in it. The sole purpose is just to cause harm. Right? The sole purpose, the sole intent is just to cause harm. He doesn't intend anything else. He just want to cause harm to people. Okay? So for the individual, for example, if they do anything like putting pollutants inside of the drinking water of a people, polluting wells, polluting reservoirs, right? Because they want to cause harm to individuals. Yahamakallah. Then of course this is what? Not permissible. Not permissible, right? Because their sole purpose is just to cause harm and chaos. Okay, let me give you an example. Let me give another example. If a person was a hacker, and he made a line of code, and the sole purpose was to infect systems and cause havoc. That was the sole purpose, right? He made a computer virus, and the sole purpose was to cause havoc. Is this permissible or impermissible? Impermissible, because his sole purpose is to cause havoc. There's no upside to it. They just want to cause chaos, right? But what if a person were to do the same, make a line of code to take over a person's system and infect their network, and then hold it at ransom until they pay the sum of money, and then they'll set it free? Is that permissible or impermissible? Huh? It's not permissible. But there was benefit in it for the person, for the hacker. The hacker is benefiting it for him because he can get money. He can get a payday because he took over, the network. But it's still impermissible. And what's the proof? This hadith, right? Because if a person does something that benefits them, but it hurts others, then it's still impermissible, right? It's something harmful, but it may benefit them, it's still impermissible. Ala kulli hal, getting back to this one. So a person doing harm just for the sake of doing harm, then bila shakku bila rayb, this is impermissible. Naam. وقد ورد في القرآن النحي عن المضار عن المضارة في المواضع. There comes inside of the Quran prohibition on causing harm and loss to others in a number of places. From these places and from these ayat that we find this is as relates to the wasiyah, as relates to the will, the final will and testament of an individual after they pass away. وقال الله تعالى, Allah Ta'ala, He says, من بعد مصية يوصى بها أو دين غير المضار نعم غير المضار. Allah Ta'ala, He says, after the payment of legacy that either he or she may have bequeathed, or after debts have been settled, so that no loss is caused to anyone, so that no harm is caused to anyone, right? So that the inheritance have to be split up, have to be divided according to the Sharia, and the debts have to be paid. And then after that, in a manner so that what? So that there is no loss caused to anyone. Naam. One of the takeaways that we find from this is that The ulama, they mentioned, the Salaf, they mentioned that to favor one of the inheritors as relates to the will over others unjustly without right, to favor some of the inheritors over others, then this is a grievous sin. Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he said this is a grievous sin, this is a tremendous sin, that you prefer and you show favoritism to others by giving them more than what is their rightful due as relates to inheritance. Naam. But these things have to be divided as Allah Ta'ala has commanded us to divide them, so that there is what? So that there is no harm. There is no harm. Naam. Also, another example of this is, as Allah Ta'ala tells us in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah Ta'ala, He says, إِذَا طَلَقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ, and if you have divorced women, نعم, فَبَلَغْنَا أَجَلَهُنَّ, and they have reached their term, their iddah has come to an end. You've divorced a woman, so I want us to define the context. Right? A woman's divorced. Her term of waiting has come to the end. Allah Ta'ala, He says, فَأَمْسِكُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ, so keep them either in goodness. The divorce has come to the end, right? So right before it is about to be over, at that point you can still what? You can still take her back. If it's a first or second divorce, you can still take her back. So it's right before it's about to be complete. Then you do what? You can either take her back in goodness. Allah Ta'ala says, "Bi ma'rufin," right? Take her back in that which is good, well known to be good. No one argues about it being good. So everything that is considered good in a society as relates to reconciling and reconciliation between a man and his wife at this particular stage, all those good things, you do them, right? You do them. You keep her in this good manner, right? Allah Ta'ala says, "Aw sarrihuhunna bima'rufin," or let them go in good. Either you keep them, or you let the divorce play out and you let them go in good. You let them part and go about their way in good. You separate upon good terms. Allah Ta'ala, He says, وَلَا تُمْسِكُوهُنَّ ضِرَارًا, and do not hold on to them, meaning do not take them back. They get almost to the end of their iddah, and then what do? The man does, he takes them back. Why? Diraran. He takes them back, not because he wants to reconcile. Allah Ta'ala, He says, Diraran lita'tadu. He takes them back just for the sole purpose of punishing her. Right? So his whole intent in taking her back is just to do malice to her. Just to do malice, just to do something evil to her. That's his only intent to take her back. It's his only reason to take her back. Right? Allah Ta'ala, He tells us what? That this is not permissible. That if you only taking her back to hurt her, it's not allowed for you to take her back. It's not permissible. And anyone who does, Allah Ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ, and whoever does that, فَقَدْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ, then he has oppressed and he has harmed himself. Because whatever harm he does to that sister, she's going to take her right from him on the day of judgment. She's going to take her right from him on the day of judgment. On the day that he really needs it, she's going to benefit because of the harm that he did to her. Now, and when we reflect upon these things, it is incumbent that we fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah Ta'ala, He says, وَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا آيَاتِ اللَّهِ هُزُوًا, do not take the verses of Allah as jokes. Do not play around with Allah's religion. Now, I'll give you an example. of how individuals, they play around with Allah Ta'ala's religion. For whatever reason, they have reached a point where they are malice, they have malice and ill intent towards their wife, right? So they say, you know what? I'll show her. I'm going to marry one of her friends who's single just so I can hurt her. I want to punish her. I want to marry one of her friends who's single so I can punish her. Is that permissible? No, because the sole intent is what? Is to cause harm. La darar wa la dirar. Nah. Nah, Mish.
So it's done, and it all depends on your niyah, your intention.
Yeah.
You just can't just.
Now, the difference between these two is an intention. Is that with one, the sole intention is just to cause harm.
If something happens by accident, your intention.
No, but accident is different. We're forgiven for the khata, for things that we do not realizing that it may cause any type of harm or anything. Then this is unintentional, right? But as much as we possibly are able, we should still strive to avoid both of these, because the Prophet ﷺ, he said la darar wa la dirar, and as Shaykh Abdul Muhsin mentioned, that darar is harm that is done intentionally or unintentionally, right? So in that, we still can be liable if we did something out of negligence. In other words, we didn't even take the time to worry, to bother, to consider whether or not this could lead to harming someone else. We just did it. We just did it without thinking. We still can be liable because we were reckless in our actions, and it resulted in someone being harmed.
Like damming up a river.
That's different, because that in a person is no, I'll give you a better example. Like the foolish ones on the bottom of the boat who decided we're going to put a hole in the bottom of the boat so we don't have to bother the people on top to get water. And then they end up drowning everybody. Allah was tired. Allah was tired. Right. Yeah. No. So in all of these things, and inshallah ta'ala, we're going to come to an example like that, what was mentioned. But we have to be very careful to make sure that we're not causing harm to anyone, right? And those things that are done and the sole intent and purpose for doing it is to cause harm, then undoubtedly this is haram. Undoubtedly this is haram. Now, the second type of harm that is done, and this kind of gets into an aspect of what we were just talking about, and that is that a person, they don't necessarily, their aim and intent is something different. They have another aim, another intent that is actually good, right? Sahih is sound, right? In the sense that, as an example, a person, he wants to build a house. All of the houses in his neighborhood are 2-story houses, and they have privacy walls that go up 2 stories around each. So no one can look over the other one's house. This person, he decides, if I build my house 4 stories, I can see the horizon better, right? And I can, get a better sunset and like this. Not realizing that by doing that, he's going to infringe on everyone else's privacy, because now he can look inside everyone else's houses, right? So this is an example that where you have to be mindful of others around you. You can't just do things, but you have to be mindful to make sure that your actions don't negatively impact them. Even though you're saying, well, I didn't do anything wrong, I just built 2 more stories. No, because now this infringes upon all of your neighbors. Now you make all of your neighbors' situations very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. So now you cause them harm. Even though you intended nothing wrong by it, but now you've caused them harm. Now, Imam Rajbi brings an example of this. He says, مثل أن يتصرف في ملكه بما فيه مصلحة له. That an individual, he spends his wealth and he distributes his wealth in a manner that has a benefit for him himself. فيتعدى ذلك إلى ضرر غيره. But that will, his spending will result in harming others. His spending will result in harming others. Now, a rough example that comes to mind, for example, if a person goes to, let's say a person goes to a third world country and he has a lot of money with him, right? He has a lot of money with him. And he goes to this country and now, and this is a real example actually. Let me another better example came to my mind because this was a real situation. When I was in Egypt, we used to hire tutors, right? And because we had American dollars and the exchange rate, and we had dollars coming in, it was very easy for us to potentially overpay a tutor, right? So we would have tutors for Arabic and things like that, in addition to the durus inside of the masajid, in addition to the universities and programs there. We would pay tutors, right? Because in the schools there, usually the curriculums were so strong, and and it's another word, but it's slipping me right now. But they were as such that you needed tutors to help you, just in order to pass. So this was normal. So we, like everybody else, we needed tutors, right? So what the Americans used to do was we will overpay because it was easy for us. So we will overpay the tutors so that we make sure we get exactly the one we wanted. So we'll overpay them, right? Now what happened was, maybe one time this happened, whatever is known, this is an anomaly. But you had all the Americans coming to do it, and this became what was normal. So one of the students one time, one of the older students, he mentioned to me, he said, you guys should really stop doing this. And I didn't understand the angle. I said, well, why? What's the problem? It's not hurting us. We can afford it. He said, yes, but it hurts the economy. Because now you have gotten these tutors for all these years you guys have been living here, used to being paid this much. So now when the Egyptian goes to them and wants to seek them as a tutor, they're asking for what you guys used to pay them that the average people here can't afford. So after you guys get up and leave and finish your studies, we can't afford these tutors anymore. You have ruined the economy in this small market. You know what I mean? Which we didn't think about that. But then we had to lean back on our prices. Then we had to lean back on our prices and start to, try to negotiate to pay less, which was not an easy task because they were right. They got used to being paid more. So you have to be very careful. And so this is an example of you spend your wealth in a manner, you spend your wealth in a manner that ends up causing a problem for others. Now, it ends up inadvertently causing a problem for others. So as Muslims, we have to be very diligent in always looking after what will potentially harm others. And even though there is no harm in it within itself, there's nothing wrong with it, we benefit from it. But if it's going to hurt somebody else, then we can't do it. We have to refrain. We have to refrain from doing it, right? So another example the Shaykh he brings, he says, "Oh, يمنع غيره من الانتفاع بملكه توفيرا له." He said, or that others than him, they are prevented from benefiting because of the manner in which this individual, they have what would you say? Because they have done things just in order to increase their own yields, just to only increase their own shares. So then others now are prevented. فَيَتَضَرَّرُ الْمَمْنُوعِ بِذَلِكَ. So therefore, because this harm will result for others, then it becomes what? Impermissible. So some real life examples, in addition to the ones that were mentioned, were, for example, if a person decides that they want to discard their motor oil after they have changed the oil in their car. So they have a problem. What's the problem? They have to get rid of this oil. So they say, no problem. I'll pour it down the drain, or I'll pour it down the manhole, right? And it solves my problem because I got rid of the oil. But in turn, this is problematic. Why? Because they may poison the water table or the underground water, and that will cause a problem for what? For the society as a whole. So this is not permissible. Even though you don't see nothing wrong in it, it's not permissible. Another example is that if an individual wanted to discard of his waste, garbage, so they burnt the garbage, but the garbage had materials in it that if burnt will release toxins, carcinogens, so on and so forth. And the bellowing of this smoke started to harm his neighbors. His neighbors became harmed by it. This is an example of an individual causing harm. They're saying, well, I'm getting rid of my trash problem, so this is beneficial for me, but then it ends up causing harm to other people. Right? So we have to be very mindful not to cause harm to our brothers and to our sisters, either directly or indirectly. So some of the ulama, they explain, and when they explain the likes of these things, this is why you find some of the translations of this hadith is that there is no harm, direct harm, nor harm by proxy, indirect harm. Right? There is nothing that is straight harmful within itself, nor things that may lead and cause and result in harm, although they themselves are not harmful. So there is no direct harm, nor harm by proxy. Now, we have to be very mindful. From this, when we examine some of the fatwa of the mashayikh, you see these principles at work. So for example, if you've ever heard any of the scholars say that if you're in the masjid and you're reciting the Quran, you should not recite the Quran in a very loud voice. Now a person will say, I'm in the masjid, I'm reciting the Quran. What's the problem with reciting the Quran? This is ibadah. But if you recite it with a loud voice and you're in the masjid, what are you going to do? You're going to disturb others. So now the brother who's trying to pray a sunnah, because you're reciting in a loud voice, now he becomes confused in what he's trying to recite in his prayer. So he has no khushu'. He keeps forgetting what he's trying to recite because he hears what you're reciting. Right? Person who would like to have a conversation with someone very briefly, now they're infringed upon because you're reciting so loud. And when the Quran is recited, we're supposed to be quiet and listen. So now you infringe upon them. Correct? Another example, the ulama they mentioned as relates to this is that if people are in the house and people are talking in the house and they say they're eating in the house, then it is not permissible just to go and turn on the Quran and turn it all the way up on the radio. Because now what are you doing? You're infringing upon the people who are eating and having a conversation. Right? So when we look at these this hadith, we find that the intricacies and the detail and concern that is given by the Sharia to not cause harm to others is tremendous. You always have to examine your actions and evaluate to see whether or not they will result in harming someone else. Right? I'll give you another example. If a person built a well in close proximity to someone else's well in a near a water source, an underground water source that was limited, and because you dug your well, and then subsequently now it made the other well dry up, can you do that? No, because you're harming your neighbor by you digging your well in the place in the area where you have chosen to dug your well. So, ala kulli hal, when we look to the concern of the legislation, the concern that the Muslim has to have to not cause harm to others, then from the two benefits and the two takeaway points the Shaykh he mentions is the Bayan Kamal al-Sharia, is it shows us clearly the completeness of the Sharia wa husniha, and the beauty of the Islamic legislation fi raf'i darar wa idrar, in removing harm and that which will lead and cause harm. Naam, to removing harm and harming. Secondly, وَأَنَّ عَلَى الْمُسْلِمِ أَلَا يَضُرَّ غَيْرَهُ وَلَا يُضَارَّهُ, is that is upon a Muslim not to harm others nor be the cause of harm to others. The Muslim, he has to be concerned to not cause harm nor be the cause of harm. When we look at this one hadith, right? When we look at this one hadith, it totally, undisputably destroys the claim and the lie of every terrorist group and organization that says that their aim is to establish the Sharia by way of what? Terrorism? How? Because every part of terrorism is harm and causing harm. It's something that is directly harmful and indirectly harmful. It's a direct harm and a harm by proxy.
To the innocent.
To the innocent. To the innocent. But I want you to remember this though as well. Even what enters into dirar, as ulama they mention, is that what? Is that one wronged you. Somebody did something wrong to you. But if your response is not proportionate, is overboard, then it still enters into this hadith. So they can't say, oh, because of the argument may come, well, what about those who are not innocent? You still can't go beyond. You still can't transgress the bounds in your retaliation. You can't transgress the bounds of your retaliation. So whatever you, or yani, not you, but I'm saying whatever a person may try to say, or why do you have to do this, why do you have to do that, you can never justify it. Well, they kill our babies and they kill our women and our older people. Okay, so then you go and blow up their buildings, and how does this equate to that? Well, their drones bombed our people. Okay, so you attack their civilians. Their military hit you, so you hit their civilians. You can't justify that. There's no justification in that. Not at all. Right? Their drone came and it dropped the bomb in our village. Okay, so you hijack their mall and you kill people that's shopping in the mall. How does this equate to that? You understand? There is absolutely no justification. Absolutely none. Which shows you that what? That their claim is false. What they're doing has nothing to do with Islam. It's not supported by Islam. The manner that they're acting is not in a manner that's Islamic. These individuals, these Khawarij, and which is more undeniable proof and evidence that their way has nothing to do with Islam, is that the Prophet ﷺ called the likes of these individuals Kilabun Nar, the dogs of the fire. The Prophet of Islam, Muhammad ﷺ, he called the likes of these individuals, these Khawarij, these terrorists who do these actions, right? He said that the Khawarij, they are the Kilabun Nar, the dogs of the Hellfire. So how could a dog of the Hellfire be anything praiseworthy? It's not possible. It's not possible. Ala kulli hal, the deen is very clear as relates to this particular topic, so we have to be very, 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 very careful to make sure that we don't cause any harm to our brothers and our sisters, that we don't cause any harm to the environment, any harm to the animals, any harm to the disbelievers, that we don't harm anyone without right, whether they are Muslim or they are Jew or they are Christian or they're Rastafarian or they're whatever. We cannot cause harm to anyone without right. And then the Shaykh, he concludes with this, and he goes to get on into the next hadith, the 33rd hadith. But inshallah ta'ala we'll leave that until the next time. فنكتفي بهذا القدر. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وجزاكم الله خيرا.